Okay. And back to the Kindle. At least that part's simple. So yeah, so good morning, Bruce. It's Bruce Ross and Lynn Johnson here, and we're reading a book called Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Dr. Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. And it's the story of the scribing of A Course in Miracles from the point of view of several different points of view, actually. So including my own, including my own point of view. So I think we left off here, but I think maybe when it will go back. Um, I think where do you have us?
I have us beginning with this last statement should be encouragement.
Okay, okay.
So maybe back a paragraph or two might be good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, just the last paragraph, the purpose of this course, maybe is,
Yeah.
or unless you want to, we'll go back to.
Well,
I got it.
one might be enough. Yeah.
Okay. Well, no, because here's this whole thing from Jesus talking to Helen. So,
Okay. Okay.
all right. So you want me to read or you want to read?
Oh, go for it.
Okay. All right. I'm going for it. All right. Jesus says he's exhorting. I love this, exhorting Helen. I noticed we use a lot of big words. Big words. It's
Ken had a good vocabulary.
yeah, he did. You know, who else? John Mundy. Man, his books have all kinds of words that people never read before. And have two people reading John Mundy books, and they're like, what the heck is what is this word? So we are getting the English lesson at the same time. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so all right, so Jesus is exhorting Helen to study the dictated material. And he says, review your note from yesterday that your identification is strong but erratic. And that is why you have so much willpower, but use it wrong at times. Bill was right about the misuse of it when you were sick, and it was a sign of superhuman will totally misdirected. Your body does not need it, but your spirit, the mind, does. And I need it too. The purpose of this course is integration. I told you that you will not be able to use it right until you have taken it. And I think that must mean having done the lessons, because really that's the only taking of the course, I think. But anyway, he says, I told you that you will not be able to use it right until you have taken it. As long as your identification vacillates, and in parens, and Bill's is weak, end of parens, you cannot accept the gift that belongs to you. You are still vacillating between recognizing the gift and throwing it away. I think I do that every day myself personally, Lynn.
I
Uh,
think that's why this everything that we're reading about Helen applies to us because even if the form is different, the content's the same, right?
exactly. And I was reading that in today's lesson too. He's kind of like, you go forward and you go back, but you're still it's okay.
We're
So Bill
wishy-washers.
wishy-washer, yeah, wishy-washer. Bill Bill regards himself as too weak to accept it. You do not know yet its healing, yet not yet know its healing power. After you have passed the course, you will accept it and keep it and use it. That is the final exam, which you will have no trouble in passing. Midterm marks are not entered on the permanent record. And so that's always a good thing to know, that the midterm marks don't say whether I passed or not. All
Which
right,
is everything before God takes the final step. In
exactly.
other words, how could illusion make any difference if it's illusion? And everything involving space and time and individuality and ego's whole thought system of sin, guilt, and fear is all made up. So the process by which we undo what's made up can't be relevant to what never changes.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, that's it.
But we grade ourselves on our own self-generated criteria uh, by which we all fall short of worthiness in our own mostly unconscious uh, evaluation and condemnation of ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like we're a grand piano. You have a grand piano and a 2-year-old comes in and starts playing around on the grand piano. That's not the same as, Mozart coming in and playing on the grand piano, but it's still the same grand piano.
Hmm. Hmm.
Nothing of it has changed. It's the operator that is the indicator of the progress or the acceptance or the learning. So it's always here. We don't get it. So so he says this last statement should be an encouragement for all students of A Course in Miracles or of any spiritual path for that matter. We need only do the best we can now. In the end, and the quote, outcome is as certain as God, unquote, from text chapter 4.
Hmm.
We shall see, as we shall see presently, the mistakes along the journey will simply disappear. And then Ken continues, the next recorded date for the notes is October 28th, and principles 17 and 18 were given, followed by this allusion to Helen's beloved mathematics. Allusion, not illusion, allusion.
Alluding to, in other words.
Alluding to, yes, yes. This is why and this is Jesus, this is why you cannot keep that thing about S. If you do, your own value can be estimated at X or infinity minus that. This is meaningless mathematically and is therefore inestimable only in the literal sense. And in parentheses, he says, I threw that in especially for Bill because he does need special signs of love. He does not really, but he does think so, into parentheses. And then Ken says, I have deleted some of the personal material for Helen and Bill, after which this message followed from Jesus for Bill. Okay. And so it starts with an ellipsis. And so be sure to tell him I did kiss him on the forehead and am kissing him again now. He is doing very well, and I am deeply grateful for his efforts. I do need help with this course. And then Ken says, Jesus always made it a point to let Bill know how much he loved him, as will be discussed again later. The numerous puns were one expression of that love. And we see that there's a lot of puns that Jesus he's a real punster, just like you, Bruce. I think you must have got that from him. Uh,
Well, I just think not taking the dream seriously is important business.
It is really, absolutely. So, okay, so this is not the place for a detailed examination of Helen's notebooks. However, I state again that to illustrate the intimately personal nature of Helen's relationship with Jesus, not to mention his loving concern and attentiveness to her and Bill, I present these excerpts from some of the personal material. I also quote from some of the corrections that Jesus had given to Helen, clarifying some points that her initial anxiety clouded over. This will also illustrate the informal conversational tone of the early dictation, whose purpose was not only to present the basic material of A Course in Miracles itself, but to be of direct help to Helen and Bill. Um, and I just wanted to kind of point that out that, a lot of folks, I think they're aggrieved because they're not getting direct help from Jesus like Helen and Bill did. So, they're looking for other notes or other ways, other special things that might have been left, little breadcrumbs along the way. And there's a lot of arguments amongst Course in Miracles students about, well, Helen did this and Bill, well, Bill really did this and that. This is all just silliness because there's nothing. Jesus is being just as helpful to me right now as he was to Helen when he was giving her the course, as he was to Bill. He's being just as helpful to all of us all the time. Nobody's
Hmm.
getting special treatment out of Jesus. So, I think people just need to get over themselves. And I know you probably don't know who I'm talking about, but let me just say there's some folks out there that have some crazy ideas. Anyway, okay, so Ken continues. Often in the beginning of the dictation, as I mentioned above, Helen's anxiety was such that her hearing, quote unquote, hearing was affected, not in the content or meaning, but of what was being given to her, of what was being given to her, but in the form or style of it. A clear example is in the current Miracle Principles 19 and 20. They read 19, miracles make minds one in God. They depend on cooperation because the sonship is the sum of all that God created. Miracles therefore reflect the laws of eternity, not of time. And then miracle principle number 20, miracles reawaken the awareness that the spirit, not the body, is the altar of truth. This is the recognition that leads to the healing power of the miracle. So this is an example Ken has given us of Helen's inability to hear what she was being told.
Mhm.
So Ken continues, but when Helen originally took these principles down, they read quite differently. Here is the sequence beginning with Helen's notes and then Jesus's corrections. Do you want to read this? I'm going to let you read on.
Sure, sure. Okay, so 19, miracles rest on the law and order of eternity, not of time. And then 20, miracles are an industrial necessity. Industry depends on cooperation, and cooperation depends on miracles. Just a quick aside, I'm thinking industrial, that sounds a little removed from the course's usual vernacular. So I
Oh,
can see
this
why
is
that's
Jesus.
corrected. Right. Yeah.
Oh,
Helen's emptying the dregs at the bottom of the well, perhaps, until the water flows more clearly.
yeah, I'm thinking so. I mean, it's what she could hear at the time, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, sure. And we all do the same thing too. We get mixed messages because we haven't learned to draw exclusively from Holy Spirit's thought system. And so, we get chaff along with the wheat as we were pulling alternately from ego and Holy Spirit, and confusing the two frequently, right? So Ken continues. Then followed a long instruction, never recorded from Helen's notebook. I reproduce excerpts from this now as evidence, again, of the personal level of teaching that occurred in the early weeks of the dictation, not to mention Helen's love for Jesus. Jesus, miracles rest on flat feet. They have no arches. Bill will be better with this than you, in parentheses. Helen, he'd better because I don't get it at all, and I am becoming very suspicious of it too. Bill did communication breakdown, or does that mean something? Jesus, clue, it has something to do with, quote, here I am, Lord, unquote. Bill knows, and then in brackets, this is a reference to the short prayer Jesus had given to Bill to say, see page 197. Okay. And now we're on page 226. And it continues. The idea is that I don't want to emphasize your specific language too much. Helen, my own associations here are very bad. A Rorschach response of footprints, in quotes, to the top red on 2. And then there's a footnote here. And the footnote number 48 says, this is a reference to the 10 ink blots created by the Swiss psychiatrist Hermann Rorschach as a psychological tool to help understand how people perceive their world. The second of these consists in part of 2 red blots at the top of the card. Okay, I imagine you and other people listening might have participated those years ago. I remember doing those. Okay, and then now the conversation again back from the footnote. Jesus, no, it's all right. It's the arch of time. There isn't any. So it means, quote, miracles rest on eternity, end of quote. Helen, I must say this is the hard way, and I'm sure this could have been done more directly. I don't see why I should get a message in a way that makes me miss the point and that I have to go into a mental coma to get it. That's pretty funny. Jesus, you've been doing that all along. Okay, not only are we sleeping, we're in a coma. Okay, metaphorically, when we're indulging in our magical solutions to a non-existent problem, right? Okay. You have not even bothered to look at the others that are very clearly stated. I just thought I'd give you this one in a way you couldn't overlook it. It's an example of shock effect, sometimes useful in teaching students who won't listen. It compels attention. Well, there's probably a few places in the course that do that pretty dramatically. Just no holds barred and no no kid gloves in the language, huh?
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay, and then
Although we read it and we think, oh, that doesn't apply to me.
well, unless we're paying attention, right? Yeah. But I think we learned to pay attention more and more over the years as we read the course
Yes, yes, we do.
and realize, oh wow, this applies at such a deeper level. I mean, yesterday's workbook lesson, for example, is just like wow, and then today's just fits in perfectly too. Okay. Meanwhile, and remember to thank Bill from me for his all-out support. I need it because you won't listen to anything. But don't worry, the three of us will make it. We're nowhere near the final. Well, that's for sure. Three volumes and two supplements later and a few poems, right?
Like this is in the first week or so of.
Exactly. Yeah. By the way, you're an example of the point on cooperation, and don't underestimate your cooperation either. You don't listen, and you would have saved yourself a lot of pain if you did. But you did get Chip over his misperceptions of S with very creditable integrity. And then Helen's response to Jesus. So I said, suddenly a little timid and very, very surprised, you mean you think I'm nice? And burst into tears. And and then there's a footnote from number 49, which I'll read in a moment, uh, said he must think so, really, because he keeps giving me everything. And he's not angry because I keep on rejecting him. But he's very sorry because I suffer so much for no reason. He was really very nice about it. I told him I really do love him, but I have trouble about it, in parentheses, though I did mean it for a little while anyway, before I got embarrassed. Close paren. And he said he understood very well and would keep on trying. So now here's the footnote 49 with regard to, and he. Okay, that was a sentence or two ago. Helen regularly capitalized the pronouns relating to Jesus until he instructed her much later to use the lowercase. Jesus's point was that was to emphasize his inherent equality with us. As he wrote, equals should not be in awe of one another because awe implies inequality. It is therefore an inappropriate reaction to me. So, do you want to pick up from there?
Sure, it's just interesting to me. I mean, she did capitalize he throughout the book,
Mm-hmm.
so he might have told her she didn't have to, but she still did it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So okay, so this is very interesting. I'm really loving this. Okay, the dictation then continued. 21. Miracles are cobwebs of iron. They unite human frailty to the strength of God. Helen considered changing iron to steel, but was told, no, steel would not be a better word. Steel is very useful, but it does have to be tempered by fire. Iron is the raw material. The point of miracles is that they replace fire, thus making it unnecessary. And wow, this is interesting. The principle is corrected a little bit later, which it is, and because the cobwebs of iron are no longer in the principle. But
Mm-hmm.
okay, so another portion from the notebooks omitted from the published text followed. and it is given here. Don't worry about your autism. And there's a footnote there. It's just a misused talent, which you really need. You have to tune out this world to see another. This ability is a gift, and it comes under involuntary control rather than involuntary lack of control. It will be very useful. And I'm going to go look at that footnote. Okay, autism, a clinical term for the psychotic state wherein one blocks out the external world. And that's not really how we define autism today, I don't believe. Uh, that it's a psychotic state where one blocks out the external world. But that is,
I thought it was a state where we tell ourselves, well, I ought to do this and I ought to do that.
yeah, that's my autism. But of course, we know a lot more about autism now. But they had a very, uh, very tight definition of it. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the dictation went on with current principles 21 and 22, along with quote explanatory instructions unquote, part of which became the first paragraph of the Escape from Darkness in chapter 1 of the published text. Then followed the corrections for the earlier miracle points. The exact order of the next few pages is problematic, as the order of the notebooks does not coincide with the typed manuscript. I have pieced together the different dictations as best I could. And so these are some corrections. All right, so Jesus tells her, correct the point, now 20, about cobwebs of iron. Yes, this is upside down as stated. The part of uniting human frailty with the strength of God is all right, but the explanation stops too soon. If iron is the raw material, cobwebs can't become the iron. That is only the way it seems because cobwebs are associated with frailty and iron with strength. If you look carefully at the phrasing, you will see it is reversed. And in parens, one point already tells you that miracles reverse the physical or lower ordered laws. End of parens. The raw material or iron is heavy but crude and stands for the body, which is a crude creation. Okay, so the raw material stands for the iron, the whatever stands for the body, which is a crude creation. The cobweb concept is closer to how the body should be regarded, uh, i.e., as an airy and very temporary home, which can just be blown away with a slight breeze.
Can
Helen,
we
yes,
pause there for a second? I
yes,
was just thinking about that. It's an interesting metaphor because I remember reading somewhere years ago, maybe not too many, but anyway, more than once maybe, that at the scale of a spider, the spider's silk, aka cobwebs, um, is stronger than steel. For the size and weight of a spider, it would if we were that size, the cobwebs would be stronger than steel.
yes,
So to me, what that metaphorically says is because we've glorified littleness instead of magnitude. Um, and there's another section in the text, I think, that talks about uh, um, anyway, it's a similar, large and small metaphor.
yeah,
But
littleness versus magnitude, or
yeah, what yeah, yeah.
um,
Anyway, but because we think we've made this world, which is from the course's perspective infinitesimal, the cobwebs of our mind that we have, the wicked web we weave, seem, impenetrable and very strong, and yet from the course's perspective, they're nothing. It can just be blown away with a little breath of air, and that's I think a good metaphor because it's really saying that in truth, nothing has really happened, but except we have led ourselves to believe that the so-called reality that we made up is big deal and tough and challenging, and oh so difficult, right?
Yes, exactly, exactly. And just wow. The even in these first miracle principles, we're getting the lowdown on the reality of what we are.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so Helen then went ahead and corrected as per instructions. And then I'm not sure how that was corrected, because then Jesus corrected it to the point should read, a miracle reawakens the awareness that the spirit and not the body is the altar of truth. This is the recognition that leads to the healing power of the miracle. Okay, and that's a miracle principle number 20. So, uh, yeah, so to see how, because he never said iron and he never said cobweb. He never said those actual words, which, a lot of people are just really down on, you've got to have the exact word that she wrote down the first time. This is a really clear example of what she wrote down was filtered through her own intellectual understanding and her own concepts of what was happening. And she wrote down something completely different than what Jesus was intending for her to write down.
Mm-hmm.
And so this correction, even though I think without that little background on it, it just is a statement. And, we don't, just by reading the statement, we don't get the nuance of how it came to be that, the whole idea of the iron and the cobweb and steel and, refined and all those things that are going on in the back of our mind, that are coming to this clear statement. Uh, and so, this clear statement that recognition is that the spirit and not the body is the altar of truth is leads to the healing power of the miracle. That's, like I said, I wouldn't have got that from her original statement that she wrote down.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think she got it either, because obviously it had to be corrected. But this is how stale, this is how stale my mind is too. I really have to be kind of dragged along and uh you know spoon fed.
Well, and I think there's nothing wrong with the fact that we go deeper in layers as we reread the content and discover, wow, you think something that I just kind of glossed over previously because maybe I wasn't ready for it and I was tuning out that deeper level. When we go back to it years later, we realize, well, wow, that's really profound and gets right to the heart of our insisting that we're the dream figure and denying the fact that we're really just dreamers.
Yeah, wow.
And so much more than dreamers.
So much
beyond that,
more. Yeah.
beyond that, we don't even want to know just yet, and that's okay. We'll want to have the peace of God at some point, and nothing
That's
else.
right. Yeah. I want the peace of God. Gotta have the peace of God. I want it oh so much. That's another old song. Anyway, okay, so Kate continues. Miracle Principle 23 then was dictated, followed by further explanation of the scribal error. Jesus, tell Bill about the idea. Helen, still dim to me. I think about how she spoke. Still dim to me. I can't even get that flat. Jesus, the reason is not that you, plural, doubt or distantiate or cannot believe. It is more of a reaction formation against a pull which you both recognize is so intense that you are afraid that you will be uprooted. But remember that a cobweb is really stronger than the iron. If you see it properly, this fear is why you couldn't get the point straight too. So he's explaining to her that her uh, her thought of why things are happening is really, and let's look at what we mean he means by distantiate. We'll just keep it here. Distantiate is a psychological defense characterized by standing away from thoughts judged as harmful. And then the other term that he used, let me go back to look at that. The other term that he used was reaction formation, which is a psychological term also, a psychological defense characterized by reacting in a way opposite to what is truly being felt unconsciously. This dynamic was particularly prominent in Helen, as Jesus explains. And so it's this state of denial, reacting in a way that's opposite to what you're really thinking or really feeling. So, Jesus says that's really what you're doing. You're in a point of, I think we call it I forget what we call it anyway. There's other terms for it as well. But that we know it's true, but we refuse to believe it is exactly what Helen said.
Right.
So
One example of reaction formation that's sort of a classic one, I would think, is the arms race. You think, okay, well, I'm feeling weak against the potential attacks from another country or another tribe or another whatever, and so we escalate our military resources, as we think of them, in order to defend what we think is vulnerable. So it's really, a show of strength, basically against the the inner assessment of weakness.
yeah,
So I think that might be a good example of
that
reaction
is
formation.
a really good example. And you make me think when you were saying that, and I was thinking about when I worked for the nuclear industry and we used to make nuclear weapons. And that was, did that. I was a plutonium handler and actually actually made the parts, that go into the nuclear weapons, etc. Um, but the whole time that we were doing this and we were like in this heavily guarded compound and you would go in every day and do all this, work. And of course, because of the radiation, we could go in and work for an hour and then we have to go and take a break for an hour. Then we could go and work for an hour and then we have to go take a break for an hour. And I
Hmm.
was thinking, we could just be taking a break the whole time and no one ever would know the difference because, these things are never going to be used. We're not making, we're not really making something that we intend or even want to be used. I mean, that was the last thing anybody there wanted was for those weapons to be deployed. That's for sure.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I always thought about it, if all the quote back in those days it was mainly the Russians, if all they were doing was, looking at us through a satellite and saw everybody coming into the building, a shift change, everybody leaving the building, they would think we were in there, manufacturing all kinds of stuff, and we could be in there playing ping pong all day, and they would never know that we weren't actually building them. But the thought that we were is enough because that was what it was, mad, mutually assured destruction. It was a belief that we could kill you and you can kill us. So we're going to try to kill you first before you kill us. And we're going to try to get the bigger weapons so we can kill you faster and better than, and we even had, uh, this is crazy, Bruce. There was a pride that went along with what we were doing because we were refining the plutonium to the point where it was 99.999% pure, whatever, so that if ever did go off, that the all the trash elements that would have come out of it wouldn't be there. It would be just the plain old, plutonium. We wouldn't be polluting the world with a lot of
Pl-
other
pl- Gluten
radio.
is that the pun?
Yeah, the clean weapon. We had the clean weapons where they were building the dirty weapons. Other people were building weapons with less pure plutonium. So they were dirty weapons and they would be much more destructive because they would put out more trash elements when they went off. This is the kind of thinking.
So in Russia is the director of their nuclear program, Vladimir Putin.
Maybe yeah, something like that. Uh, but I mean that's how silly it is, this whole silliness. So that's the way I'm looking at this. It's a reaction formation. It's we
Yeah.
believe and we believed seriously that whole idea of mutually assured destruction was what drove our economies for years and years and years. And when
Hmm.
Russia
Oh
gave
yeah.
up the ghost there and stopped being the Soviet Union, and all of a sudden, there was a lot of other little things going on, but that threat was kind of tampered down. And then, we had to go into a different kind of mode of operations. And
Hmm.
eventually we said, well, we have to stop making these things because, we did a treaty saying we're not going to make them anymore. That's not true, but we did make a treaty saying we're not going to make them anymore. And according to the world, that was stopped. Now that's not true. And everybody knows we still have lots of nuclear weapons and could absolutely destroy the world many times over if we chose to. Um, but we're pretending like we don't.
Yeah.
We're,
Yeah.
we're pretending
I
like it.
I think we might have already had this discussion, but have you seen the movie about the man who saved the world about
Yes,
Stanislaus
yes,
Stanislav Petrov, I think is his name, the general who basically single-handedly one evening when not one, two, three, or four, but five simultaneous false alarms came in on the Russian defense system electronically, and he ordered all of his the different stations that would have launched retaliatory missile attack to before they launched anything, they had to have visual confirmation of the incoming missile,
yep.
and I think that was what literally saved our butts. And I think around 83 is something like that when that
Yeah,
incident
was it
occurred.
Matthew Broderick was playing a game of chess with a computer? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, regardless of what it is, it's just kind of testimony to the tiny mad idea. And of course, that general was demoted because he wasn't following protocol. It's well, the protocol is you know be crazy, right? I mean, what a great symbol for the ego's insanity. It's like you no, you didn't follow instructions and blow up things, so we're going to demote you. Uh, you know,
Right.
but it
Because
was
we
it was
can't.
more than a slap on the wrist because he had some, well, at least the way he took it, he had some psychological issues and personal stuff, and the rest of the film deals with that, but kind of a side story almost. But anyway, but I thought it was a really interesting movie, and on the level of form, we all owe that uh, military general or colonel or whatever his rank was, debt of gratitude for having the presence of mind to follow his guidance to not um, you know launch a counterattack against what was false evidence appearing real, right?
Exactly, exactly. And
And
to
then
do
and then I,
it
and then the MAD acronym comes to mind. It's like, well, if we wanted to expand that classic course quote, the tiny mutually assured destruction idea of of separation, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's just, I mean, our life is in symbols. Everything in our entire life is in symbols.
Hmm.
And if we just learn to look at those symbols and interpret them correctly, we would be over all this fear that we have. But of course, that's what this course is for. So,
Yeah.
okay, so I'm going to continue reading. Okay, so Jesus continues here with wordplay that was fairly typical of him during these early weeks of the dictation. By the way, it is not true that you are both just scribes. You might remember that the scribes were very wise and holy men, and even spelt sometimes with a capital S. If you want to go further, you could even shift just from merely to honest, a term used in the Bible in association with might. Tell Bill you couldn't make that pun if the original phrasing had been singular. And then Helen made an aside about liking an earlier pun referring to a special pun for Bill. Uh, then Jesus, Bill, is still under the impression that he needs special signs of love. Note also that the special language here is a combination of both yours and his. You two came together in my name. Answer, it was cuter, but this one means more. The real reason you don't like it is because it refers to you in a very lofty position. This makes you nervous. So she didn't like being called the scribe because she didn't feel like she was worthy of it, right? And
Mhm.
so don't lose sight of the emphasis on cooperation or the not singular. That point about industrial necessity should read corporate, referring to the body of Christ. And how she interpreted corporate to industrial, and that, I mean, it was just an interpretation of the same word used in a different way. So, referring to the body of Christ, which is a way of referring to the church. But the church of God is only the sum of the souls he created, which is the corporate body of Christ. Correct to read, a miracle makes souls one in God. Leave in the next part about cooperation, though. And so let me go back and look at that. Is it still miracle principle number 23 he's talking about here? Go check
Let's
it.
see, where was that? Let's see, 19 and 20, but then maybe there was another one mentioned.
Uh, I guess it doesn't, I don't really know, but okay. Because I don't see that. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. If you see anything, let me know.
Okay.
Let me go back just real quick and look.
Should I pick up where you left off? Why did that?
Yeah, I'm just going back to look where
Okay.
Miracle Principle 23. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
23. That's right. Okay.
so okay. Okay. All right. So yeah, go ahead and continue.
Okay. We're at Jesus then continued, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Jesus then continued. Remind Bill to get another notebook. And then brackets, Helen was then using a smaller one and needed a regular size. Close bracket. I don't give up as easily as he does. If I could get you to listen, I can get him to register. Getting you to listen was a miracle in itself, and he should appreciate this more than anyone else, having had some trouble with this problem himself. Quote, Lord, heal me, unquote, is the only legitimate prayer. This also means, Lord, atone for me, because the only thing man should pray for is for forgiveness. He has everything else. Now take this personally and listen to divine logic. And divine is capitalized there. If, when you have been forgiven, you have everything else, and if you have been forgiven, then you have everything else. This happens to be the simplest of all propositions. If P then Q, P, therefore Q. The real question is P true? If you will review the evidence, I think you will find this inescapable. I went on very personal record to this effect, and I am the only completely true witness for God, with T, W, and G capitalized. You have every right to examine my credentials. In fact, I urge you to do so. You haven't read the Bible in years.
I'm
Well, of
just
course.
laughing because he's saying, I went on very personal record to this effect,
Uh-huh.
as
Yeah.
in whom I was crucified. And came back to life in the world very personally. You can see that if you've been forgiven, then you have everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, go on.
Yeah. And then of course he demonstrates that, crucifixion is impossible because This today's workbook lesson suggests, there is no world. This is the central thought the course attempts to teach, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Bottom of page 229. The foregoing syllogism is among the most basic propositions in logic, a form with which Helen was more than familiar and which recurs in the course. Incidentally, Jesus is excuse me, urging Helen to read the Bible should be understood in the context of her having used the avoidance of the Bible as a symbolic means of avoiding Jesus. Reading it again would now be the symbolic of turning back towards him. So from that, I gather he's saying, don't take the Bible literally, but use her resistance to working with that symbol as a an opportunity to generalize that to really getting the meaning of the course. And I think that could apply to many of us. I know I resisted picking up Ken's Forgiveness in Jesus book for decades until about, I don't know, 6, 8 years ago. I finally opened the book. I bought it right after it came out, actually, I think pretty close. And finally opened it up, and because the image on the cover is like, well, yeah, I don't know, just was resistant. So, but that changed eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting when he's talking about reading the Bible, and they're talking about reading the Bible. Do you think they're talking about reading like the entire Old Testament, New Testament,
I,
or New
again, I think he explains that there is this, like, it's really, in Helen's case, and was probably more specific to her, that wasn't suggesting that she read it for the content, but read it for the mental exercise of looking at her resistance to the symbol of what the Bible you know supposedly represented as a voice of our higher awareness. At least that's what I get from it. Because I mean, there's, as Gary Renard points out in his work, there's over 600 corrections to the Bible in A Course in Miracles. So that's a lot of fixing up. Yeah,
muted, but all those corrections, none of those corrections, I don't think, were of the Old Testament. I think most of those corrections, or maybe all of them, were in the New Testament about Jesus and the things that he did and said and whatever. So that's more what
probably.
I
Yeah,
think is
yeah,
happening there.
yeah. It'd be interesting if somebody's correlated all those. Yeah, be interesting.
I think
Interesting
somebody
exercise.
has. I
Yeah,
think somebody has done that.
seems like somewhere maybe. Yeah. Well, if you run across it, let me know, because I'd
Okay.
be curious. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So you want to go from there?
Okay. All right. So at this point, Helen took down notes on the atonement, which were subsequently placed in the later miracle principles and latter portions of the first chapter of the text. In the context of Principle 27, Jesus stated that the atonement is the, quote, natural profession of the children of God, because they have professed me, unquote. He then used this as a punning way of making a point to Helen and Bill. The puns commented on earlier were meant by Jesus to be special gifts to Bill, who again was an excellent punster. And then Jesus says, "Tell Bill that is what, quote unquote, professor really means. As an associate professor, he must become associated with my strength. As an assistant professor, you must assist both him and me. The children need both strength and help. You cannot help until you are strong. The everlasting arms are your strength, and the wisdom of God is your help." And then Ken says the subject turned to Revelation, the material of which is largely contained in the beginning of the section in chapter 1 called Revelation, Time, and Miracles. It was interrupted in the notebooks by this passage, omitted from the published text, which seems to describe an intense experience of Helen's. And then we're going to hear this experience that Helen had, and we do have time for this. Helen to Jesus. Lord, I will leave my desire to help him, Bill, in your hands. If you will tell me what to do, I will to do it. I remember this exact thing. If you will tell me what to do, I will to do it. And I will do it. I will to do it. Jesus. And that is the answer. Helen, the impact of this was incredibly intense, like a great burst of unexpected clarity. It was briefly so compelling that it seemed as though there was nothing else at all. The whole world just disappeared. When it faded out, there was no after effect except a dim sense of wonder that also faded out through a trifle slower, though a trifle slower. I was told to, quote, write nothing else that evening, unquote, but we pick up the course again in the morning. It was also explained that kind of experience was at the revelation level, which is different, but not by any means out of accord. So yeah, this is just a whole little description of Helen having this experience of this intense experience, like a great burst of unexpected clarity, briefly so compelling that it seemed as though there was nothing else at all. The whole world just disappeared.
Hmm.
When it faded out, there was no after effect except a dim sense of wonder. And I know I've had, experiences like that, and I'm sure that you have too, where we're just like suddenly in this place of of to me joy and clarity and just everything just seems bright, and I just feel so happy. And yes, it does fade off because the ego is very resistant. Okay.
True dat. But it may be foolproof, but not God-proof, as we're reminded all the time.
Exactly, exactly. And then, he gave her a little break and said, don't write anything more tonight. Just take it easy now.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. This is a
Should I pick up from there?
sure.
Okay. The notes then continued with a discussion of the differences between revelations and miracles, part of which is found in chapter 1. As an aside, Jesus said, tell Bill that miracles do not depend on revelation. They induce it. He is quite capable of miracles already, but he is still too fearful for revelations. Note that your, in brackets Helen, revelation occurred specifically after you had engaged at the visionary level in a process of denying fear. Tell Bill that your propensity for revelations, which is very great, is the result of a high level of past communion. Its transitory nature comes from the descent into fear, which has not yet been overcome, not being overcome. His own, quote, suspended, unquote, state mitigates against both extremes. This has been very apparent in the course of both of your recent developmental patterns. Miracles are the essential course of action for both of you. They will strengthen him and stabilize you. Note that the much more personal than usual notes you are taking today reflect the revelatory experience. This does not produce the more generalizable quality which this course is aimed at. They may nevertheless be of great help to Bill personally, since you asked for something that would help him personally. It depends on how he listens and how well he understands the cooperative nature of your joint experience. You can help only by reading this note first. Ask him later if this should be included in the written part of the course at all, or whether you should keep this note separately. He is in charge of these decisions. So, and then Ken comments, this latter point is consistent with what we noted in Helen's letters from a month or so earlier, where she recognized the importance of leaving certain decisions to Bill. And then let's see. Yeah, I think we have time for one
I
more
was
little.
just talking for a minute and didn't even have my mic unmuted.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
this is where people get the idea that it was up to Bill to, I think this is where they get the idea that it was up to Bill to edit the course. And
Hmm.
that's why when they gave that a copy of the book to Hewlett and Casey, uh, that is what people now call the Thetford edition because it was the edition that Bill edited. So and that's what, of course, now is what we call the sparkly or uh, the the pearly, or there's all these different, the original edition, all these different editions that are that first pass through that I think that Bill made. I think this is where they got the idea that he was the one who had to do it and
Okay.
not Helen and Ken.
I know of those, but I haven't explored any of them really because I just figure there's so much in the the, the final version that's it gives me plenty to work with.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's the way I look at it too, Bruce. And I think we're about close to the end of our time. So
we are.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's just fascinating though to see how this comes about and how uh, these discussions between Helen and Jesus and him telling, tell Cam this, or tell Bill this, and this is why I gave this to you for Bill, and I mean, just very personable discussions going on between Helen and Jesus, uh,
Hmm.
and it's no wonder she was, you know, gobsmacked, or whatever the heck she said. Uh, just too much confusion.
Yeah.
So. All right. Well, thank you, Bruce. I do appreciate
Likewise.
you being here with me on Saturday morning.
Oh, absolutely. So mutual. Yeah. And look forward to the next picking up where we left off next week.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and stop that
And
share.
thank you all for joining us. Yeah.
All right.